On August 18, 1976, one of the most absurd yet dangerously tense moments of the Cold War unfolded inside the Korean Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, a heavily fortified strip separating North and South Korea. It began, unbelievably, with a tree. A single poplar tree, growing near a checkpoint, would trigger an international crisis that almost escalated into war. The event would later be known as Operation Paul Bunyan, a massive U.S. military show of force launched over the right to trim a tree, and it remains one of the most surreal demonstrations of military power in modern history. To understand how it happened, we need to go back a few days before the operation. The tree in question stood near the Bridge of No Return, a key crossing point inside the Joint Security Area, JSA, of the DMZ. This was one of the few places where soldiers from both sides, American and South Korean on one side, North Korean on the other, could physically see each other. The poplar tree had grown tall enough to block the line of sight between Checkpoint 3, manned by the US and South Korea, and Observation Post 5 on their side. This was no small matter. In the DMZ, where every movement was monitored, visibility meant security. American and South Korean officers decided the tree needed to be trimmed for safety reasons. On August 18, 1976, a team of U.S. Army officers and South Korean soldiers, armed only with axes and escorted by a small security detail, approached the tree to begin trimming its branches. It seemed like a routine maintenance task, but within minutes, things spiraled out of control. A group of North Korean soldiers, led by Lieutenant Pak Chul, known as the Bulldog for his aggression, arrived on the scene. He demanded that the trimming stop immediately, claiming the tree was planted by Kim Il-sung himself, the founding leader of North Korea, and was therefore sacred. When the Americans ignored his order and continued working, Pak Chul gave a chilling command. Without warning, dozens of North Korean soldiers rushed in, armed with clubs, axes, and pipes. They brutally attacked the unarmed US and South Korean team. In the chaos, 2 US officers, Captain Arthur Boniface and First Lieutenant Mark Barrett, were beaten to death. Several others were severely injured. The attack lasted only minutes, but it shocked the entire world. When news reached Washington and Seoul, outrage exploded. The US viewed it as a premeditated act of murder, and the North Koreans, as usual, denied responsibility. The situation threatened to ignite a full-scale conflict. In the aftermath of the brutal attack, tension across the Korean peninsula reached boiling point. The deaths of Captain Boniface and Lieutenant Barrett had enraged both Washington and Seoul, but any reckless retaliation could trigger another Korean War. The US needed to respond, powerfully, decisively, yet without sparking open combat. President Gerald Ford, along with military leaders at the Pentagon and the United Nations Command in Korea, approved a plan that was as dramatic as it was symbolic. The operation was codenamed Paul Bunyan, a reference to the legendary American lumberjack known for his size and strength. The goal? To finish trimming the tree, but in a way that left no doubt about US resolve. If North Korea had tried to assert dominance with brutality, America would respond with overwhelming force, without firing a single shot. On the morning of August 21, 1976, just 3 days after the attack, the operation began. It was a spectacle unlike anything the DMZ had ever seen. At precisely 7 a.m., a convoy of 23 US and South Korean vehicles rolled into the Joint Security Area. In the trucks were engineers carrying chainsaws, their mission simple: cut down the poplar tree completely. But surrounding them was an armada of firepower that made it clear this was no ordinary pruning job. The engineers were escorted by a company of combat troops, supported by attack helicopters hovering overhead. Nearby, B-52 Stratofortress bombers flew low across the sky, visible from the North Korean side, a clear warning that air superiority was not in question. Behind them, F-4 Phantom jets streaked past in formation. Meanwhile, artillery units along the DMZ were placed on full alert, loaded and ready to fire at a moment's notice. Even the aircraft carrier USS Midway was repositioned off the Korean coast, prepared for immediate engagement if things went wrong. It was a demonstration of controlled fury, a message to Pyongyang that the US would not be humiliated, even over something as small as a tree. As the operation unfolded, every movement was calculated. The chainsaw crew, just 8 engineers, began cutting the poplar tree that had sparked an international crisis. Behind them stood soldiers from the U.S. Army and South Korean Special Forces, fully armed with M16 rifles, grenade launchers, and bayonets fixed. Across the border, hundreds of North Korean soldiers assembled, shouting and waving weapons. For a few tense minutes, the DMZ teetered on the edge of war. All it would take was a single gunshot to ignite chaos. But no one fired. The air was thick with tension as the whine of chainsaws echoed through the zone. In less than 45 minutes, the tree that had caused so much bloodshed lay on the ground, completely dismantled. The engineers left only a waist-high stump, a deliberate symbol of finality. The moment the mission was complete, the convoy withdrew as calmly as it had arrived. Overhead, the helicopters and bombers circled one last time before returning to base. The entire operation had been executed with surgical precision, and, incredibly, not a single shot was fired. The message was loud and clear. The U.S. had reclaimed its authority and honored its fallen officers, not with revenge, but with overwhelming presence and restraint. Within 24 hours, the North Korean government issued a rare statement expressing regret over the killings. One of the closest things to an apology Pyongyang had ever made to that point. Operation Paul Bunyan became an instant legend in military circles, often studied as an example of psychological warfare and crisis management. It showcased how a superpower could project dominance through strategy rather than violence. In the years that followed, the incident prompted significant changes to DMZ security protocols. The Joint Security Area was restructured to prevent direct physical confrontations between opposing soldiers, reducing the chance of similar incidents. Even today, the stump of the original poplar tree remains at the site, a quiet but powerful reminder of how fragile peace can be, and how close the world came to disaster over something as simple as a tree. Operation Paul Bunyan stands as one of the strangest moments in Cold War history, a surreal mix of symbolism, tragedy, and military theater that proved even small acts can echo across the world stage.